And
Can I?
that was it.
That was me.
I will read a closed session. There were 5 items that the board considered on the closed session. Item 5 to 6 were constituted a reasonable action. Item 5 to 6 were classified as liaison 2. Item 5 to 6
Now you can use your mic.
Okay. So now we're asking for audience input. So this is an opportunity for any of the public to address the board on issues not on the agenda. There are some rules that we like to maintain in terms of it, but unless I have someone who's going to speak, I'll forego those rules. Is there any audience input? Okay. Then we'll move on to input from our Employees Association. We always do like to give an opportunity for employees to speak on things not on the agenda. Okay, then we'll move on to the Medical Staff Executive Committee report. And we have Dr. Koch, our Chief of Staff.
Good evening. So we have 3 consent agenda items tonight. The first was presented at the last meeting, but had an issue with the risk statement not being properly written, and it's now properly written, and so we're bringing it back. And it's basically just following the new guidelines for tuberculosis screening, which has now gone from every year to every 3 years. It's that simple. The second consent policy is regarding newborn discharge and admission care. And again, the risk statement was not correct, but the rest of the policy was reviewed at the last meeting. And the risk policy has been updated. This is for term newborns. And so there were no additional changes to the policy other than the risk statement. And then finally, the third item on the consent agenda was also a neonatal policy, but it was for preterm infants. And again, the risk statement was the only concern, and that has been updated.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Koch, for taking that back and having those risk statements added to it.
It was a merry-go-round for a little while, so it's definitely new for some of the departments, and
Sure.
it's a little bit of a challenge to figure out how to write it as a risk statement, and so, but we got there.
Yeah, and I was going to say, high reliability committee might be of some use to, coming up with how to help you with those kind of statements. So thank you again. Are there any comments from our board in regards to any of these risk statements on the policies?
Nope.
No. Okay. Anything from our audience? I do believe we approved them with the with an addition of the risk statement, so.
We actually said we would bring them back.
Okay.
That's how we left it last time, and so that's why I'm bringing it back. But we did review the policies and what the changes were, and there didn't appear to be any issues with regards to that.
So then, do we need to approve them again, legal counsel?
Yes, I think it makes sense,
Okay.
given that they are amended now with the updated language.
So can I have a motion to approve the Medical Executive Committee calendar?
Move approval?
Second.
Okay. So it's been moved by Director Brown, second by Director Barnett, to approve the Medical Executive Committee meeting consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So thank you again, and keep up those good risks. I don't know if there are good risks, but statements.
Good with
Yeah.
statements. Statements are good.
Okay.
Keep up that risk mitigation.
Yes.
So then we have the consent calendar, and these are really documents that are non-controversial. Oftentimes they're a report, and I know that it has been a quick turnaround from our usual meetings, and so there really are very limited reports that are on the consent calendar, but certainly any of our members of the board can pull, if they wish to, anything that's on the consent calendar. Do we have anybody that wants to pull anything?
No, I'd just like to thank Crystal for turning these around so fast for the financial statement.
Thanks. Yep. Okay. Is there any of our staff members interested in pulling anything? Well, I thank you for that. So, can I have a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented?
So moved, Dale.
I'll second.
So it's been moved by Director Shamlin, second by Director McGarry, that we approve the consent calendar as presented. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed. So the consent calendar is approved. We'll move on to 14, and this is going to be some of our meat of our meeting. 14.1, the fiscal year 2023, the audit financial statement. And I think we have on hand Moss Adams, and it might be Brian Connor. Okay, you're moving your lips, but we can't hear you.
Because we hung up on
And
it.
you're backwards.
Never seen that.
Hi, Dustin.
Oh, boy.
We're looking at it from behind the screen.
Yeah.
Were they going to be coming through the phone?
Does this need to be on?
With the audio system, it goes through.
Should we tell them to stand by?
Do you have to join audio there?
The audio runs through Rory. Correct, Rory?
That is correct. And I am not hearing it.
Stand by.
Yeah.
Can he hear us?
It's interesting, it's showing up fine there.
Yeah, but this one isn't, I wonder.
Yeah, that's.
And didn't we also have that on when Future Sense was talking?
We didn't have mics though.
Oh,
It works one way if you have this room system. It works another way if you don't.
there's always a challenge with
We'll
Yeah.
survive.
communications.
I don't know.
Rory, I think,
He's,
is working on
he's
it.
working on.
Justin, can you hear us? We just couldn't see you. You
Yeah,
can hear
he's
us.
saying yes.
Okay,
Again,
but we can't hear
Here.
you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stand by.
It has nothing to do with that being on mute.
Yep.
It's not even.
Hmm.
I mean, if we got on the
Maybe
phone,
I'm
we
giving
could-
the presentation.
she has her, that means that her computer's on mute.
Yeah,
Is that what you're talking about?
I guess, I just, whenever I see that, I can't hear it.
It's
I think so.
You're seeing his screen,
Okay.
not.
I just wanted to make sure we all.
That
The only
is
thing would be
ours.
if you have to join audio and join it to the system. Is that not a thing you do on Zoom?
That room is outside of what I.
I'm going to trust the sound guys working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get on the phone, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, we could.
We can
Get on
just,
the phone, turn the mics off, take the report.
we could do the phone and we can go through the pages for them. can't
Yeah, we have the visuals as part of our materials, so. Well, but,
Yeah, they're going to explain it, though.
yeah. The audio needs to be picked up by the broadcast, right?
Do we want to jump the Moss Adams and go to the compensation and while they're working on that, or?
Can you work on it at the same time?
Do we have any idea of the time? Because we can go to compensation, that one, because it'll be quick. Okay.
He
Is-
doesn't know. Rory, would it be better to drop the broadcast of the Zoom and then dial them in by phone?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll do that.
So do you think we have enough time to go ahead and go to incentive comp?
I think so. I mean, if you want, it's only gonna take a couple minutes in my mind, but that's up to you all.
What do you think? What is your thoughts?
It's at your discretion. I don't know how long it's going to take them to get.
Okay, so Mary,
I can make this very abbreviated, since we really don't have anybody from outside the
So, do they know
hospital
what we're
here.
doing now? I'm just,
They can hear us.
so,
we-
what are you doing, Martina? to get
We'll
them
drop
connected?
the media off the Zoom so that we can just dial it in like we did when Future Sons was on earlier.
Can you put that in the chat? What we're gonna go on to different topic while you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. If they can hear us, then great.
We'll come right back to you guys in just a few minutes, okay? All right, we got
did they give you a thumbs up? Okay. All right, Mary, do you want to go ahead and,
Yeah, I can talk really fast.
yes, okay.
Little thumbs up, but-
Well, let me just summarize everything that we talked about earlier. 2 years ago, I think it was, we committed to the CEO that we were going to try to move the CEO salary to the 65th percentile of the peer group out there. And correspondingly, the incentive compensation would go along with that. So we had an extensive report from Future Sense at our meeting on Tuesday. Looked at lots and lots and lots of data, and the outcome of all of that was to, in order to maintain that 65th percentile, the CEO salary would be increased by a number of 6.6%. And so that brought the base salary, which I understand you need to read for the record, that brings the base salary to $792,004. And then correspondingly, the incentive comp, the at-risk compensation, is 30% of the base salary. So that would be an additional $237,601 for a total potential, and this is just a potential, if all metrics are hit in the incentive compensation package, that would bring it to a total of $1,029,605 annually. So this is coming as a recommendation for approval from the Executive Compensation Committee.
Any questions from our board about this? Okay. Again, the executive comp went over this with Future Sense. We had the HR chief there with us, and again, looking at what our commitment was in terms of compensation.
We massaged a lot of data
Yeah.
and even sent it back to be refined and came back in the meeting, so
Okay.
I feel very confident.
Any questions from our audience regarding the annual compensation? If none, then can we have a motion to accept the, Mary, how do you want to say that?
Do you want to first do the annual adjustment, which is
You wanna do it in two parts?
14.2?
Oh, I thought that's what we were doing.
Right, but we're not doing the 14.3 yet. Correct. So it would just be a motion to approve the 6.6% adjustment pursuant to the employment agreement with the CEO.
Right.
So that's
Right.
14.2?
14.2.
Yep.
14.3 is a look back to the last year for the incentive compensation that will be paid this
Yep.
year.
So you don't
That's
really
different.
see the actual motion. So Mary, can you give us a motion in regards to the annual compensation?
Yes, I would like to hear a motion that approves the 6.6% increase in the CEO's annual compensation, taking the base salary to $792,004, and an acknowledgement of the fact that there's also a 30% incentive compensation that goes along with that.
Okay. So do you want to make that as a
I'll
motion?
make that motion.
Okay, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Director Brown, seconded by Director McGarry, that we approve the recommendation from the executive comp in regards to the 6.6% increase in base salary and the 30% incentive comp. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So that is what we will use, Mary, as we have approved that.
Okay, thank you.
Are we ready to,
Rory, are you good if I kick you out of the Zoom?
Go ahead.
That's all they do.
okay, as the
We still have
vice,
to do 14.3.
Correct.
Yeah.
Welcome to
as the
Zoom.
the
Enter
vice
your meeting
chair,
ID.
when we have lapses like this, it is your responsibility to present a joke,
Enter
to
your
fill in the time.
Joe, a song?
Oh, a song would be good too.
Holiday
You
song?
are in the meeting now. There are 3 participants in the meeting.
So Brian, can you hear us? We can see you.
Hang on.
I think it needs to be done by closed session.
Okay.
Go now?
Okay, Brian, this is Alice Wong, the chair. We are so good, we're so glad to hear your voice. You can't imagine.
I was at a healthcare conference recently and heard a presentation on artificial intelligence in healthcare, and the presenter made the joke that AI is easy, AV is hard. So I don't know about the first part of that statement, but the second I think is true and has been proven again here this evening. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you to share the results of our 2023 audit there was materials that were distributed in advance that you received, including a PowerPoint that we were going to work through here this evening. I don't know if you can see that.
We can't.
Yeah, we can't see.
We have it on our.
You can, okay. And for slide advancing purposes.
Oh, I have it, Brian.
It's
Oh,
coming
you're
up.
going to share it. Okay,
We got it.
even better.
Yep.
So we're all good to go?
Yes.
Excellent. We'll work through this slide presentation, which is in your materials. It's been altered slightly. Justin will explain that in a little bit. As always, if there's something in the other materials, something in the additional materials, especially the financial statements that we don't cover in our presentation you want to hear about, make sure you let us know, and we'll make sure we'll cover items that we otherwise haven't gotten to. But this is what we expect to cover here this evening, our prepared remarks. Our scope of services, talk about the auditor report, significant risks that we've identified, and how we dealt with those during the audit, matters that are important and required to be communicated to the governing body, as well as financial highlights. So in the next slide, let's talk about scope of services. So we have performed the annual combined financial statement audit, or I should say the annual audit for the combined financial statements of Tahoe Forest Health District as of and for the year ended June 30th, 2023. You can see on the right-hand slide, other non-attest services that we've provided, which include assisting your management team in drafting those combined financial statements, and then the review of the 990 and other returns for various entities that are included in the reporting entity. So the most important part of this slide is on the right-hand side. None of these non-attest services that we've provided we believe impair our independence with respect to your annual audit. We believe we are independent to provide those services. So one of the important parts of this, the auditor report, we have a draft unmodified opinion. I should say, I think you have, Justin, if I'm correct, that we have draft material that we sent over. We're ready to issue after this meeting. Those materials are based on an anticipated unmodified opinion on those financial statements, on those combined financial statements as of for the year ended June 30th, 2023. It's the highest level of assurance that we can provide, and it means that we believe those financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. They do include, that report does include an emphasis of matter that discusses, and Justin will talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation, the implementation of a new standard. This is the second year in a row that you've had a pretty significant standard implementation. This is GASB number 96 for subscription-based information technology arrangements, very similar to, or I should say, pretty similar to the lease standard that you had implemented last year. Is taking arrangements that have traditionally been off the balance sheet and putting that activity on the balance sheet on both the asset and liability side. So unmodified report in the current year classic clean report, highest level of assurance that we can provide. So significant risk. We've identified a couple of here to discuss. This certainly doesn't account for all of the testing and the activity line items, balances, et cetera, that we look at during the audit. But we do go through a risk assessment process, and we'd like to focus our attention in areas that are most likely to have misstatements to the financial statement when we think about designing our procedures. So certainly, first and foremost, is the valuation of your patient accounts receivable and net patient service revenue is the most significant estimate in your financial statement. So we do a lot of work in there. We perform a look back to your 6/30/2022, your prior year accounts receivable, to see over a longer period of time how your model and your management's model is performing on a cash collections basis. We also analyze subsequent cash collections for June 30th, 2023, those collections that were received subsequent to June of 2023 for services provided during that year end. And then we do a bunch of analytic procedures and some additional detailed testing. Our procedures didn't indicate any material misstatements within your accounts receivable or within the revenue cycle in general. It was pretty clean. We have actually seen a little bit of a slowdown in collections kind of across the industry, particularly amongst commercial payers. They have been a little bit slower to pay. We're seeing a slight slowdown in collections after June of this year relative to prior years, but still indicative of a really accurate valuation of your accounts receivable at year end. We feel very comfortable about the collectability of that number. Additionally, we've identified management override of control here. That is a required significant area of risk in financial statement audit. And so we perform inquiries of your accounting and operational personnel, risk assessment procedures, as I mentioned earlier. We test journal entries. We do a lot of testing to ensure that that there's no evidence of management override of your internal control structure, which would obviously be a significant risk of material misstatement. There are other areas in your financial statements that are important that we do a lot of work in. I mentioned the SPIDA arrangement, the subscription-based IT arrangement. That was a really big lift for your management team this year to implement that standard. We did a lot of work around that. Traditionally, we'll do a lot of work around your risk management program liability and pressure testing those estimates and in all of our procedures. We did find, as Justin will highlight here coming up soon, any issues with that. It's really clean from that perspective in these areas and all other areas. So the next slide, I'll start with the important matters and required matters to be communicated to the governing body. And to do that, I'll turn it over to Justin.
Perfect, thanks, Brian. These next few slides we'll run through. These are really just a summarized version of the AUC 260 letter or governance letter, which would also been included within your packet. We'll run through this kind of at a high level. I'll kind of call it anything significant, but definitely feel free to reach out if there's any questions. So as Brian alluded to, these are all items we are required to communicate. First one is significant accounting practices. Big items to note here, as Brian has mentioned, the district did adopt GASB 96. That did have a fairly substantial impact to the financial statements. You'll notice on both the balance sheet side, roughly around a $30 million pickup from an asset in the as of 6/30/23, and about $26 million in the prior year, but fairly substantial pickup. The work around that, it was really kind of collaborative work between your team and our team here, because it is a very big lift. It essentially requires reviewing all subscription-based arrangements related to IT. So everything from credentialing software to ERP software, a lot of that things that are electronically based really kind of starts the basis for this determination on whether these are going to be in scope and out of scope. And so definitely a lot of work on the finance team over there, and luckily we have been able to work through all that and get it where it should be. So definitely kudos to the team over there for that piece. Aside from that, no other significant changes in accounting practices or policies during the year. We found everything kind of implemented by management and current policies to be adequate, and as we'd expect to see, which is a great thing to see in the organization. Significant unusual transactions. If there were anything that we would be considering significant or unusual, we would be required to communicate those to you, but there is nothing to note in the current year that would be unusual for the organization. This slide, as well as the slide to follow, are really important slides to highlight how well the team is doing over there at Tahoe Forest. The first one here is uncorrected misstatements. If we had encountered any misstatements regardless necessarily of value that we would deem immaterial, we would be required to communicate those to you. And happy to report there were no uncorrected misstatements, nothing that we deemed immaterial that management hadn't reported, which really speaks highly, as I mentioned, to the organization. The next one here really focuses on if there were material corrected misstatements. These are items that we found to be materially misstated, items that would have required correction for the statement to be in conformity with U.S. GAAP, and happy to report no items were noted in the current year. And since we've been doing this, I think the last 5 years at least, this has kind of been the true statement here. Nothing in the prior years or the current year related to material misstatements. So definitely a very good job there for the team. Other required communications we would communicate to you would be if there was any significant difficulties encountered during the audit, we would bring those to your attention. Nothing to note related to that. If we had any disagreements with management, if there's anything that would have affected the content of the audit report, nothing to note for either of those two as well. Same thing with the last few here. We're not aware of any consultations with other accountants related to matters during the audit. No other significant audit findings or issues that arose during the audit that we would feel appropriate to communicate to you. And then really the last one here, or second to last one, the management representation letter. This is just to call out, we do require and do have management sign a representation letter, which is really just outlining responsibilities both from management as well as on our end. I'll run through now the financial highlights section here, and then we'll kind of cover a few ratios, and I'll kind of note some changes there from the original version you received. So what you're going to be looking at is really a 3-year side-by-side comparison, just to give you an idea of fluctuations year over year. I won't call out every single one here because some of these items are really consistent year over year, not overly significant fluctuations. But starting with the balance sheet side here, slight dip in your assets limited to use, roughly 19 million, almost entirely driven just from sales of assets limited to use during the year, or just dispositions actually using the cash of those ALTUs. You'll notice that just by looking through the cash flow as well, really just the excess of sales over purchases. And then aside from that, another item that really kind of buffers that amount too to help that number was really the change in market value for the current year. Had fairly substantial loss in the prior year, not quite the same for the current year, which is great. Otherwise, capital assets, slight uptick, really entirely driven from the additions during the year. Roughly 25 million in capital assets were added, offset by about 15 million of depreciation expense. So that's really the big driver there. And then one that I'll call out here is really other assets and deferred outflows. As you'll see, and I'll kind of take this back to 22, looking into 23, a really big jump there from 22, from 21 to 22. That is entirely driven from that new Galaxy 96 subscription asset. That standard is applied retrospectively, so we go back to the earliest period stated on the financials, which in your case is 2022, and the restatement starts there and works its way forward through 23. So there was roughly about a $26 million pickup in 22, which is where you see that increase showing itself. And then following from that, the current year, around about $7 million, I think, of additions to those subscription assets. But really, that's the primary drivers there. Slight increase in some of the lease, Gatsby 87 stuff was related to the prior year. Some increases there in leases, but really main fluctuations here are driven entirely from the Gatsby 96 adoption. On the liabilities net position side of the balance sheet, really not a ton to call out here. Decrease in current liabilities, very, very minimal, really just driven from fluctuations in liabilities at year end. Long-term liabilities, slight decrease, which we really would expect to see. No new debt has been added during the year, so we would expect to see some of those liabilities decrease without any additions there. And really, the net position change is entirely due to the change in operations for the year and the amount of excess. Looking at the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, this is a year-to-year comparison. This does not include TSC, just to really focus on the material dollars here for the district. As you kind of look year over year, roughly around a $23 million pickup here in operating revenues. Really very consistent with what you would expect. You know, the prior few years, there was fairly substantial growth across the board at top line and bottom line. Slightly cooling this year, but really still following that same trend. The increase here was really, as we would expect to see, given the increases from the past 2 or 3 years. So definitely aligned with that. As you look at the allocations here of expenses to revenue, you're going to notice everything here is consistent with the exception of salaries and professional fees. And that's literally just a flip-flop there. Hiring of positions has caused that professional fees number to start to go down, and really that's picked up through salaries and wages. Otherwise, across the board, really looking at this, no fluctuations here out of the ordinary or worth noting, which is a great thing to see and seeing the consistency in how the organization is operating. As we go through these ratios here now, I do want to call out in the initial draft you would have got, there would have been a comp A, a comp B, and a comp C. After chatting with Crystal and just kind of finding what's most meaningful to the users as well as the board here, I kept 2 different comps in there. This would have been on that version you have, comp B and C. And then I went in and added the S&P triple B minus, as I know that is a benchmark used to the organization. So just wanted to call out that change there. Otherwise, kind of really looking at this slide, days cash and investment ratio, 204 days, slight decrease from the prior year. Really nothing out of the ordinary causing that decrease. Decrease in cash and ALTUs with the increase in operating expenses really is what kind of causes that fluctuation. But I think the thing to note here, debt covenant requirement 60 days, well in excess of that, which is great to see. And then really looking across the board at both Comp A and Comp B, which are other very similar organizations, critical access hospitals, district hospitals as well. You'll see very consistent. And then looking at the S&P triple B minus, well in excess of that number as well. So definitely a great thing to see from a days cash and investment ratio standpoint.
Justin, can I?
As we look at days and accounts receivable.
Wait, hold on one second.
Yep, hold on, Justin.
Probably go to the mic.
Yep. Chris will add that comment.
Oh, I turned it off, sorry. I just wanted to note that the triple B minus, this might look a little different than what you saw in the budget package. And when we did the budget package, they hadn't produced the latest one that came out in August. So these are the absolute latest ratios by S&P, which the triple B minus actually dropped quite a bit compared to what it was in the previous publication. So just wanted to let you know that.
You'll see as it relates to comparable groups and other similar hospitals, slightly lower in the days accounts receivable ratio, which is a great thing. Slightly up from the triple B minus rating, but still very, very consistent and not a bad place to be for where the organization is sitting. I think internally goal might be roughly around that time frame, but definitely as we would expect to see it, nothing out of the ordinary there to note. As we look at the salaries and benefits as a percentage, you'll notice slight uptick from the prior year, as I had mentioned previously, entirely driven from that shift in professionals to salaries and wages is really what's driving that up. Slightly higher than other comparable organizations and the triple B minus, but one thing to note there too is a lot of these comparable comp groups that we have, as well as those included within the triple B minus rating, they are standalone hospitals, a lot of which do not employ necessarily their own physicians, whether contracted through PSAs or other medical groups. And so not out of the ordinary to see this slight uptick in Tahoe forces as it relates to both comp groups and prior years. And then this, I think, is one of the best slides to see here to speak to the organization, and that's the operating margin. Obviously not quite as high as it's been in 21 and 22. I think those years were very, very great years, hard years to expect to consistently follow, especially with the uncertainty in the markets. But really comparing that to comp groups, most other organizations are still dealing with kind of digging themselves out of the post-COVID timeframe. And so you still do see a negative operating margins here, as you can see within both comp groups, and then looking at the triple B minus as well. Still working their way out of that kind of post-COVID operational kind of deficiencies there. But great job overall for the organization, and still keeping a positive bottom line, which is great, in operating margin. And so that is all that I have for my prepared remarks that we have here. I'll stop screen sharing here, but I can turn it around and back to you for any questions you may or may not have.
Any questions from our board? I do want to let you know that we have been interviewed by Justin in the past, in this audit, in terms of what we've been informed of. And apparently we have done well in our interviews.
Justin, we have a large amount of cash with Chandler Investments, and I just want to know what you feel about the security of those assets.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as kind of the overall looking at that, first of all, from a valuation standpoint and getting how we get comfortable over that work, just to give you that side of it too. We do review reconciliations. We do agree purchases and sales during the year, making sure those are properly stated. We do confirm directly with the financial institutions holding those assets as to that asset balance as of 6/30/23. And then on top of that, not that we think they're not experts at looking at valuations, we also do kick those investment securities over to our internal valuation team as well to reprice those securities at that point in time, just to ensure those numbers are reported correctly. And as it relates to, I won't speak necessarily to the how I would stack those investments up, I guess, Dale, compared to others, because I'm not an investment advisor. But overall, from the security standpoint, I think those are all, for the most part, level one securities that are very easily quoted and marketable within the market. And so I don't think any other or significant risk outside of your standard interest market credit risk. But Brian, do you have anything else that you would add as it relates to kind of safety or security around those types of investments?
Well, yeah, Dale, I'm assuming that you kind of, the primary context of your question is, if I understood it correctly, is related to the cash in those portfolios and whether with the relatively recent banking crisis, there's any concerns related to deposit. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's an interesting, we get asked this a lot. You know, you have organizations, banking organizations, regional banking organizations in particular, that, you know, might otherwise, you would presume based on their portfolio, that they would be highly rated and secure. It's hard to evaluate assets in depository institutions in a bank run. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. We don't believe at this point that there's, and we certainly have talked about it quite a bit, that there's any need for excess disclosure around deposits in excess of insurance that's available. Certainly something to think of. Government organizations have certain protections that others don't, but I don't see any untoward or excess risk in that portfolio in particular, or in your deposit regime in general, based on, you know, what the environment that we're in this year, but particularly what happened, you know, in the first and second quarter of this year.
Brian, I think you're probably aware that we hired Gary Hicks, who's a financial advisor, right after Silicon Valley Bank failed and some other banks failed, to just give us a general state of the health of our banking. And he also reviewed the safety of our investments with Chandler and gave a clean bill of health. I just wanted to know if you had anything to add to what he has already done for us.
Yeah, well, I think that's wise. We know Gary well. He's very capable, and he'd be a good one to assess that. And I agree with that assessment, generally speaking. Now, it doesn't mean that you have zero risk in deposits, especially deposits that aren't otherwise insured. But, you know, the way the Silicon Valley Bank and a few others, the issues were resolved relative to their those having deposits there. You know, I would feel like, you know, you'd be relatively comfortable for deposits held in mainstream banking organizations. Again, we don't see any undue risk.
Thank you.
If I might make a couple of comments. When we were reviewing the change between pro fees and salaries and wages, it wasn't just due to contracted physicians becoming employed, but to remind you, we had our therapy services convert as well. And so between those two groups is what really made that biggest shift for us between 22 and 23. And even though we've been with Moss Adams kind of a long but short time frame, I'm going on my 20th anniversary here in March, and it was only the first year that I started at Tahoe Forest did we have adjustments by the auditor, and never again was that going to happen. And I am so grateful to my team for the 19 years post that. We have never had an audit adjustment, so I give huge kudos to my accounting team for holding the standard high.
That's a strong statement.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, any other comments? Then can we have a motion to approve the
Accept.
fiscal year?
Accept.
Oh, accept, I'm sorry. The fiscal year 2023 audit financial statement.
So moved.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to accept the financial audit. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So it's been accepted. Thank you so much. Thank you, Moss Adams and Justin and Brian, for the work you've done. And thank you, Crystal, and
Thank
your
you.
team.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Same to
Good,
you.
thank you.
You guys, just so you know.
Bye now.
Okay, so then we're going to move on.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Such a cheery voice.
We've done 14.2, so we move on correctly to 14.3. The President and CEO Executive Officer Incentive Comp for 2023.
Okay.
Mary, you've got this one as well.
Thank you. Yes, as we mentioned earlier, the President and CEO is eligible for up to 30% of their base salary in incentive compensation. And there are, I think, 6 metrics that have to be, maybe 5 metrics that have to be met. And they're weighted goals, and they need to be met in order for the full compensation to be paid out. And our very first metric, and if you'll follow along in the thing in your packet there, first metric is finance, and it represents 53% of the 30%. And to achieve that, the CEO needed to meet or exceed budgeted net income as approved by the board for fiscal year 23. And we know that the net current income is now $30,715 against a budget of $22,370,000. So that was fully achieved. The next metric is our service. We wanted to meet or exceed an average of 94.2 on the Press-Ganey patient satisfaction score. In fact, we achieved a number of 95.25, which is just huge, and pretty amazing. The next metric is quality. We wanted to meet or exceed 98.2% of the CEO bundle. You have before you what the things are that comprise that bundle, and we exceeded that number by coming in at 98.47%. Growth is 10%. We're hoping to meet or exceed annual physician office visits by, I'm sorry, we wanted to exceed the previous year's office visits, which totaled 116,000. And we actually totaled up almost 130,000 visits. So, I mean, it's just, they're bursting at the seams. People, probably one of our most important, which is 13% of our 30%. We wanted to meet or exceed the 90th percentile in the engagement category from the Employee Press-Ganey Engagement Survey, and we actually achieved a 91st percentile ranking. So we're batting 100.
Yeah.
You know, it's a remarkable year. Harry, I just can't say enough about it. It's pretty, all these numbers pretty much speak for themselves.
We have an amazing team here, and I'm really proud of them. Every single one, 1,300, and then our leaders, and their efforts each year are what are allowing us to push that ceiling upward every year a little bit. And I do believe this is the greatest critical access health system in the U.S. With what our team is doing here, and I couldn't be more proud of what they do. But most importantly, all of us are super proud because we're all doing this for our community. We're trying to build a very special, sustainable, very rare rural health system that I said a statement last night that we serve about 8 counties, and I went to this map in our office, and it's way more than 10 counties that patients come to us from. But we're really here, we've been really trying to listen to our patients, provide them great care, and see how we can honor them and be sustainable. And I think we've done that better as a team than any rural health system out there. So we thank you for the commendation, and our team couldn't be prouder, but it's a thank you back to our community.
And when the executive comp committee met and saw the metrics, it was like our mouths were wide open, like, oh my God, we are good. We are doing the things that we were supposed to be doing, and that we're, batting 100. And I once was told, well, we never set ourselves up at 100 because that's could be defeating the purpose or the activities to meet it. But I tell you, when you look at 98.7, we're getting to that 100%. So thank you. Thank you, Harry, for leading the team. Thank you, team, for doing the work that you do, making our community a better, healthy one. So what we need now, if there's no other comments, is there any?
I would like to make the motion to consider all the metrics achieved and approved, and approve a full payout of 30% of the base salary of the president and CEO's fiscal compensation.
Okay,
fiscal year 2023.
Before we hold on to that, do I have any comments from the staff or from the audience regarding? Okay, so it's been moved. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Director Brown, seconded by Director Barnett, to approve the incentive compensation of 30%
of the base salary.
Of the base salary. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So your incentive compensation will be paid out.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your consideration and your comments. Our team really appreciates it.
We didn't pull anything from the consent calendar, so we'll move on to 16, board committee reports, and executive comp has met, and pretty much you
have nothing more to report.
Yes, you've done well. And then we have quality met.
Yeah, there were actually 2 committee meetings I'll report on. One was board quality. One of the changes we made to the quarterly quality meetings, I'm just super excited about. We created a closed session where we could actually present actual cases and really get into the nitty-gritty details of it. And I found that we've done it a couple of times now, and it is so incredibly helpful. Obviously, can't get into the details of that in open session here, but this specific case we covered, it was a 5150 that really challenged the team, and the open conversation, the acknowledgement of what went really well and where things didn't go as well and what could be improved, I think is just a fantastic addition to that meeting. It really helps. I think the board members that are up there understand really just the day-to-day challenges that go on. It's you don't appreciate it until you really hear that frontline story of what's going on. So I just that took up a good chunk of the meeting, and the other was a really great conversation around data governance, which is a massive topic in and of itself, but really started to peel apart the importance of not only understanding the data we have, but how do we best utilize that as an asset, not only to guide decisions moving forward, but even to make predictions around certain aspects of the business. So 2 really good conversations there. The other was a board foundation meeting. It must be a financial audit time of year because that was the big activity for the foundation meeting was the annual audit. Fundraising to date, $286,795, so sort of on track to where things were last year. And I think was mentioned earlier, there was a fantastic social event hosted by Mike and Julie Teal at Rayleigh's One. Just a huge public thank you to them for hosting a great event. And we had great representation from the Incline Foundation, the Truckee Foundation, as well as a number of physicians and staff. So really well represented, and a great way to kick off the holidays. I think everyone was a little shocked to hear Christmas music, but it kicked off the holiday party season in quite a good fashion. So,
Well, thank you for that report. Governance Committee met as well. We met on the November. We looked at the board self-assessment, and we're going to continue with the format that we have. We had some discussion about just the ratings that are given and what they mean. We're going to again put out the current format and then relook at what kind of data are we getting back. We looked at also the board enhancement goals that we set at our April meeting, and everything is in progress. We're interested in getting the community engagement codified with their charter, and that we're waiting for that. We're also looking at who in our board, because one of the goals was to increase board presence in partnerships in the community. So we are taking a list of those and who is serving what. We know that we've got partnerships with the town, we have partnerships with the homeless advisory committee. There are a lot of partnerships that we have out there, but we'd like to have them at least listed so that everybody knows what they are. Also, order and decorum has been pulled, and we did work very hard on that, and the wordsmithing of it took a lot of time, and I also can see why it needs further discussion. So again, we'll be doing that later. And I think pretty much that is about all the governance. We did make policies. We had an AGOV policy on public funding, and this is to get us in a place where there is a process when people want to ask for funding for a health program that they're running or whatever, that we have a policy so that everybody is treated equally. And it depends on whether, it's aligned with our mission, vision, and values. And then another one that we did was the one regarding community sponsorship. And this is going to have the actual application of how you do it. So that's still in the process of being reviewed by legal counsel. The interesting part, because of the codification of the engagement committee, is that I don't know how many eyes have been on the bylaws, but we found a statement that we have never really adhered to, which had to do with resolution of officers and committees. And so they will start doing that. There you go. Isn't that, aren't we going to do that?
Yeah.
Make a resolution.
Well, we have to defer to council whether, do you need a resolution beyond a board action, for the officers or the charters each year?
Because it's in the bylaws, and that's why we questioned it.
I will need to review the bylaws related to that particular item.
Okay.
My hope is a board action would suffice, but we'll
Yes.
defer to council.
Because that's the practice that it's been over
Right.
all these years, was just board action and not a resolution. So
Okay,
anyways,
I will review that.
okay, thank you so much for doing that part of it. And then we looked at our educational platforms, and we looked at Verilon, which used to be iProtein, and we found that there have been no new educational sessions added since we started. And all the ones that we've done, all the ones that were available to us. So that we're going to recess from that. We're not going to go back to it. And we're going to start looking at AHA and ACHD, who put out webinars that you can go back and review that might be more helpful to us. And also the AHA Rural Healthcare Conference is going to be in Orlando. And we are members and we are eligible to attend. But in looking at those presentations, we asked the board if they were interested. If a board member is interested, they may go, but what we've gotten so far is that it's a long way to go for information that we've already had or will get other ways. So that's what the governance committee has done.
We elected to save some money.
Yeah.
And also, we were looking at our climate transformation. And we now have a representative. Ted is going to the climate transformation meetings, and the next one in February is going to be here in Eskridge. Uh-oh.
January 12th, I believe.
February? It's not
I
February.
think it's January 12th.
Okay. The next meeting, whenever it's scheduled, we'll be here. We'll let you know. Okay. So that's all the reports that we have from our committees. Any closing statements from any of our board members?
Clarifying, question, did we then join that, or are we just
No.
being represented?
Not yet
Okay,
joined. Exploratory right now.
thank you.
And they're exploratory right now and forming.
Yeah, go.
Okay. Again, any closing remarks from any of our members? Okay, if not, I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And I want the board to know that our meeting is going to be in 3 weeks. So it's going to be a quick one again. It'll be on December 21st. And and at that time, in December, we will be going through election of new officers. So just keep that in mind. And other than that,
Well, we do have a closed session.
Yeah.
No.
the open session is,
Right, so we would read us into closed session again, which is related to public employee performance
right.
for the CEO. If anyone has any public comment on that item. If not, then we would adjourn the open and move into close.
Okay.
Next time.
We're not